what I want from you is that now we usually see all those news in daily news broadcasting, right? There is a flood. Now
Yeah.
people realize, okay, there is extreme drought, right? People aren't able to match that with the bigger narrative of climate change. Okay, so what I want from you is people have to understand is environment is not one single thread; it's a web.
It's a web,
Everything is
exactly.
interrelated, right? So if you give tension to one thread, it's going to impact everything, right? It just
Exactly.
has that tension everywhere. So
That's true.
what I want from now is, can you explain how things are interrelated in environment, right? If there is a glacier melting from Himalaya or North Pole, how it affects your daily life here in Pune, right? So that we can why we should worry about melting ice glacier on Himalaya, right?
Right, absolutely. No, like you said, it is 100% true. You're absolutely right on that track. It is all interrelated, and like you said, it's a web. So even if like a slightest problem in one of the things around you can actually change something around you that's like miles away from you. You might not even feel it. For example, now if you see, if there's like a polar storm somewhere around in the US, the winds around over here in our area also get affected. There was a big bushfire in Australia recently. I'm sure everybody read about that in the news.
That means
It was extremely devastating. It
just the
was
optics of it was so horrible.
exactly, and it was terrifying. There were so many species that were lost. There was such a big amount of plant species and animals that lost their lives. So many people lost their lives in the bushfire, and the amount of impact it created on the environment was tremendous. But it happened in Australia, and we had orange skies in New Zealand for an entire day. So you can understand how big of an impact it was, that all the bushfire and all the smoke that it created came all the way to New Zealand and had orange skies in the day for an entire 24-hour period. So you can imagine how big of an impact that was. And this is what happens. If there's something changing in one part of the area, it definitely affects the other. Like you said, if there's like a glacier melting. So on these poles, the North and South Pole, if you see that there are ice glaciers melting all the time, you keep seeing a polar bear standing on a little block of ice. And that is like a big
I want
image
to
of
come to
climate
that
change.
image, okay, later on. That's a poster boy of climate change, a polar bear.
Absolutely.
Afterwards, but continue.
Yeah, so basically that's what you see. And if you see that, if the glaciers melt on a large scale, there are reports that have confirmed that the countries around these poles will face a maximum amount of devastation. So if the glaciers in the North Pole, in the Arctic Circle, melt completely, Canada will basically go underwater. That's what they have said. So it affects everything that's happening around you. If the glaciers are melting, there are going to be floods all the time because the amount of water that is rushing towards you is going to increase. And in India, we might not feel that because we are not close to the Arctic pole, but it's going to eventually hit us in some way or the other. So if there's effects happening on one side of the country, in one side of the world, we are definitely going to see it at some point or the other in our own country as well. There was like a good example that I actually thought of recently, the cyclones that were happening. So the coastal cyclones, it went from Mumbai and then down towards south and all of those things. Those cyclones, they actually did not start anywhere in Asia. The cyclones were a result of the winds that started over here in the western side. But you can imagine what kind of an impact it was to create a cyclone in the Indian side of it. So it's really, I mean, these are just like basic examples. I'm not really sure of the I'm not really sure of the technical part of it, and whatever I read in the news, that's what I saw. I didn't really go much into depth of it, but that's what I read, that it did not generate anywhere in the Indian region. It generated elsewhere, but we did have cyclones in our own area, so we can imagine how it works. And again, we have floods all the time. If we have flooding in Mumbai every year. Why is the sea level rising every time it rains in Mumbai? There must be some reason to it, right? I mean, we kind of get adapted to it because we are living in a particular area and we're like, oh, this is what is going to happen. So we learn how to adapt ourselves. But is that really the solution to it? We do need to adapt ourselves, but we also need to make sure that we find a solution to the root cause of the problem. So that's what we need to work towards. And for this, we need to understand how these events are basically created and what actions of ours create these events. That is more important.